Bangalore, India. So today we have a very, very enthralling discussion. It's going to be one that is engaging, one that's captivating, because it's the need of the hour. It's, it's something that we're all immersed in. It's something that we're deeply experiencing at every level of our being. We are here to talk about the evolving face of journalism through new age media. And new age media is really, like I said, that it's all encompassing and it's radically shifting the way we operate. So it's, it's almost a revolution that's taking place in terms of interactivity. I think that's really the most defining, distinguishing aspect of the new media that we're immersed in and how we engage with it. So we have the industry experts here. I must stop talking so I can hand it over to our illustrious panelists. And look at the timing. Dr. Padma is also here, welcoming Dr. Padma as well. I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Aditya Raj Kaul. He's the contributing editor with CNN News 18. Welcoming Dr. Padma Rani. She's a director and professor at the Manipal Institute of Communication, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Welcoming an academician amongst this panel of journalists. So that will be wonderful as a perspective as well. Welcoming also Jaskirat Singh Bava, news and media professional, as well as a IVLP fellow, which we know is fellowship that the US Department of Education and Culture runs. And we'll hear his perspective, more on the topic soon. Not the least, in any measure, Danish Manzoor, welcoming you, the editorial director of the International Business Times, tuning in from Dubai. So we're fairly global in this moment and we're celebrating that. And without further ado, I want to take this opportunity to hand it to our generous moderator for this conversation, Aditya Raj Kaul. I hand it over to you. To the stage is set and you may drive it in a direction that would be, in your way.
All right.
Over to you, Aditya. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mansi. And welcome to all the guests and panelists, fellow panelists. I know two of them who are very dear friends and have played a very immense role all through the last couple of decades, or 1.5 decades that I know them. Dr. Padma, also honored to have you. And before I begin, formally introducing and then going ahead, I want to confess and perhaps take an apology here because this is a Women Economic Forum and this is perhaps the one odd panel where there's only one woman speaker. So, I'm already getting in criticism on social media that, औरतें कुछ कम तो नहीं है इस panel पे. But anyways, I'll take the liberty to, take this forward and, we'll begin this panel with Dr. Padma. But it's a very interesting topic that has been given to us to discuss the changing media, the changing landscape of the media with the introduction of the new media and particularly social media playing a very important role in transforming journalism, especially in the last 1 decade. And this is the decade that we, perhaps Danish, me, and Jaskirat have seen, new media very closely. How it has evolved from the traditional media of the radio, television, newspapers, to social media, to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram playing a very important role, from journalists to, in fact, influencers playing a very important and significant role. And now, with the click of a button, anybody actually is a journalist, by clicking a video or your views that are, getting millions of hits on YouTube or similar platforms all across. And it's a very nascent stage right now here in India as well, where we are seeing a lot of transformation. For instance, I have just started a few weeks back a show on a particular medium on the Android platforms where, on the click of a button on your lock screen itself, you get a video digest of, everything possible. Who would have thought that on the mobile screen, even without clicking a button, you will actually get, the entire video stream and news and latest updates. So there's a lot of transformation, and this transformation is not restricted to journalism and media itself. For instance, politicians, political parties, or even, industrialists and others have used this new media for their respective businesses. Who else than our own Prime Minister? Prime Minister Modi has used, social media significantly. I don't know how much he loves or hates the media, but he has used the social media to actually directly reach out to the public and have a direct conversation. So, without further ado, I will, in fact, just get into, introductory remarks mode. I request my panelists to, in fact, restrict their introductory remarks to 5 minutes. And I'll begin by Dr. Padma. You are someone who is an educator, someone who teaches journalism, but teaching journalism has also seen a massive transformation. I come from Xavier's. More than a decade ago, I was at Xavier's. And at that moment, I was a very below average student, very honestly, all through my academic life. But there, I don't know how I managed to get one award. And while receiving that award, I told everyone that I am from that school of thought who believes that journalism really cannot be taught. Journalism is something that comes inbuilt inside you. Yes, you chisel a little bit through, education, etc. But journalism is something, isn't really taught. But now, with the introduction of this technology and social media and etc., which has, of course, there's a good, bad, and the ugly part into it. So how do you face this challenge? Because this is an evolving stage of social media and new tech as well. So how do you, as a teacher, as an educator, see these challenges? And are there changes in the syllabus, in teaching as well, that you see? What are the challenges really? Ma'am, please.
I think we may have lost her. Can we just redirect to another?
I think back.
There we go.
Yeah. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, a decade back, I don't think, people who were senior journalists did not go to a journalism school. Most of them learned on the job and they started. But now you find that, I'd like you to know that there are approximately 400 media and communication colleges in the country which are running these courses. And it is no longer only teaching the long form of journalism, because over the years, what has happened is initially everybody associated journalism with newspapers.
Right.
Yeah. Then came TV, and newspapers today are facing competition from all sides. In India, thankfully, readership of newspapers hasn't gone down. But if you look at it, the English newspaper market has saturated. It is the regional language newspapers, or the Indian language newspapers, I would prefer to call them. They are the ones who are growing. And therefore, there is an opportunity in the newspaper industry for people either who are very good in their Indian languages, or who are comfortable in their language, mother tongue, I would say, or any other language, or people who are bilingual. But even these newspapers, I'll give you an example from where I belong to in Karnataka. We have a small newspaper which is run here called Udayavani, which is the 5th largest circulated newspaper in Karnataka. It has a circulation of about 35,000 copies. And during the pandemic, when the first lockdown happened, and they are a very strong market. People who know about coastal Karnataka, they are strongly in the coastal Karnataka market. They take about 70% of the readership, including English, in the coastal Karnataka region. And they came up with something as a PDF of the newspaper on WhatsApp. Because this is something which is really innovative. And that's how I would like to say that as teachers, we need to be innovating quickly in our teaching methods, so that even those students who want to study or who want to pursue print journalism also do not lag behind. And why did Udayavani do that? Why did they have to make a PDF and circulate to their readers? Was because most of the readership base is in semi-urban and rural areas. The headquarters of the newspaper is in Manipal. They are in semi-urban and rural areas where transportation was stopped during the first lockdown. So they had to use, somehow to reach their readers who had no other source of authentic information. And that is how the credibility of the newspapers rose during the pandemic. Now, as a teacher, as an educator, I draw on from there that today the media journalism as a practice is also changing very fast. When in the 80s and 90s, we were teaching journalism, the long form of journalism, we would ask our students, take your source, or verify your source, write at least a 500-word article or a 1,000-word article. Today, a 140-character Twitter, something that is very spontaneous, it has to be done immediately. Immediacy is the whole idea of news. So today, and also there is a pressure because the producer is also the consumer. When you take social media, that is what makes it different from the traditional media, that is television, radio, and newspapers, that the producer is also the consumer. On Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook, when they are creating news content for themselves, which others are consuming, and that's how we had a lot of misinformation, disinformation, fake news getting circulated during the pandemic. It's been there, but it was more accelerated or more obvious during the pandemic. And also, like you rightly pointed out, that video post, because the attention span of the reader or the audience is going down. Their attention span is very less. They hardly read a newspaper from 10 to 12 minutes. So if you're going to write elaborate articles, nobody is going to read it. You'll have very few readers reading it. Or there are people who research has shown that on social media, they get the smaller version, and only if they're interested in it, do they go to the newspapers to read the elaborate. So the kind of stories that newspapers need to carry today is also the long form of journalism, where it is more about opinion, about analysis and things. And as an educator, that becomes a very tough task for us, because today we are not only teaching them the basics of reporting and writing, but we also have to teach them that, okay, on social media, if you're going to write the same article, what are you going to pay your emphasis on? If you have to put it on Insta, what kind of a visual would you use in this story? And it's like you rightly said, it has to be practiced to understand. You cannot just teach them any theory. And what at MIC we did during the pandemic is also an example I'll talk about. But it's more about convergent journalism that we are talking about today when we are teaching. We no longer, teach the print separately or the broadcast separately or the new media separately. We might have courses in our, bouquet of courses which are separate. If a student wants to do only print, he can do it. But in overall, we would like to give him or her a complete package where they know how to make a radio news, they know how to make a video news, they know how to write, and all this is integrated into one, because today immediacy is on social media. Your visuals have more effect than your words. So you need to have small, precise video content. And also that, let me tell you, mobile phones, the Android phones have really revolutionized the way we are operating in journalism. We could never think that with the help of a handheld device, which will replace our cameras and things, and we could do reporting. Or we could immediately, wherever you are, in whichever part of the world you are, you can tweet and your story goes up. So that sense of the news is also very important, and which is being done. And in fact, if you look at it, today, the major change in journalism, I would say, is because of two things. One is because of the rise of bloggers and user-based journalism, which is immensely popular among both old and new medias, and they have really altered the definition of journalism. And the second thing is that, the content aggregators like your Google News and Huffington Post and all, where, it is not the individual journalists who are providing news, but instead, they depend on only their ability to gather and collect information into a single location where users can access it. That was not the case a few years ago or a decade ago. I would say years is not, a decade ago. Now, all these challenges are something that only if our curriculum addresses it will our students be valid to even, take up jobs in the market. And an educational institution today has to focus on the employability of its students. Focus on, but also see that they are contemporary in nature. Now, how did we do it? And how do we do it is, we use the pandemic as an example. During the time of the pandemic, our students used to bring out lab newspapers every week. So we said in the pandemic, yes, sit at your homes, make your newspaper, work together on Google Meet or on Teams, make your newspaper, make a PDF of it and circulate it. And that's why I gave you the what Udayavani PDF example, because they first came up with who will read our newspaper if we do a PDF. I told them, if a local newspaper can reach out to so many people, why can't you people do it? And they were able to reach out to at least, their families, their, friends, alumni, and those kind of things. And it also helped them write about, understand about wherever they were located, because I have students from across the country at MIC, and we said, okay, wherever you are, from your homes, look for stories around you, and that also gives them awareness about the environment that they are staying in. And that also helps in kind of a community engagement. You don't want to tweet, but just write that story as a blog, as as the part of the college newspaper, make a PDF of it and circulate it. And also it helped them to empower, initially the students would come up with, nobody gives us information. So we said, look at the sources, go to them, persuade them, because that is how you're going to get your information. You will not simply get information. And what we also did was, luckily before the lockdown, we had conducted some fact-checking workshops for them. So we said, okay, just identify a news, do a proper fact-checking of it, bring it out that, why is this news authentic? Why is it not? And that is the only way we could create awareness among our students that such things are there and we need to make use of it. Even with the videos, we have all the facilities, the studios, all that were lying vacant for 1.5 years because there were no students. But then we said, do it on your mobile. Do small videos on your mobile, news stories on your mobile, and circulate it. Let's see what happens with that. And they were able to
Okay, we seem to have a technical snag. We'll return to Dr. Padma in a bit from now. She made an introductory remark.
do it because we are not edited. I would say.
Dr. Padma, I'll just request you to hold because we lost you technically. You made your introductory remark. I'll come back to you in a bit from now. I'll get in Jaskirat and Danish in the meanwhile. I'll come on the fact check and the disinformation part to Jaskirat, but before that, Danish, where are we right now? And that means where is the media right now? And specifically the Indian media. When we speak about television, when we speak about, the evolving media, the high-pitched, shouting matches that happen on Indian media are very much known. I've been guilty of working in several of those platforms as well. But, how is the transformation really happening? On television front, are we still at a very nascent stage? You've been digitally involved. You've been in earlier Avatar involved with tabloids as well, newspapers as well. and now with the magazine and digitally as well at a global level. But one thing is very clear: the newspapers are dying, and perhaps the COVID pandemic has resulted and shortened their lifespan of the newspapers as well. But particularly in India and perhaps in the West as well, uh, are we really sinking, as an industry? Because there is, new media is changing things dynamically, but the traditional media, televisions, newspapers, radio, uh, is something that is not going to survive perhaps more than a decade now.
Right. So, Aditya, I think in this era of broken news where we set out to break news initially, with the influx of social media, and then, as Dr. Padma also mentioned, that the necessity that people feel to sort of break the news fast, we have ended up breaking the thing called news. And also at the same time, that in the era of screamers, what media in India per se is going through right now as an entire industry is a massive deficit of its credibility. So we definitely are not in sync with what the consumers expect of us, with what the users want and what we should be providing the users. People are trying at this point of time. Everybody has thrown their hands up in the air and they're trying to evolve or devolve in some cases, like you mentioned, with respect to the screamers. But this is a very interesting time in the field of media, especially looking at India as a very fast developing nation. And with the broadband speeds gone up and access to 4G in every smartphone, and smartphone numbers growing exponentially with every passing day. So the access to data, the access to devices where they can actually convert their data into media is huge at this point of time. So that is where you have also seen your platform that you mentioned about Glance, how this company found an opportunity on a lock screen, which basically was right there in front of us, the most underrated, unused real estate, the screen real estate that we have at this juncture, and they made use of it, right? And we did a show, I think this last week on Bitcoin on that, right? So it is a very evolving field. I think the worry we have at this juncture is on two fronts. One major front is the credibility deficit at this juncture, wherein the political parties have also played a very, very critical role in trying to ensure in one way or the other that credibility of some journalists and some media houses, in many cases, rightly so, because there has been evidence that those media houses have not exactly been conducting themselves the way they were supposed to do, right? So from the era that we've seen, I think we've been at a very interesting turning point of media, because we saw that shift that Dr. Padma was talking about, that we saw from quote unquote analog to digital, and then from newspapers to television, and then suddenly getting into digital and multimedia. And now we are at a very advanced stage, but it is also just a beginning at this juncture. So I believe unless and until in our nation, we are able to, as journalists, as media educators, we are able to address the part of credibility crisis that the media faces, every other solution is gonna be a piecemeal measure to fix what is wrong with it. Technology will definitely come to the aid of dying businesses, like you mentioned about newspapers. However, I do believe in India, newspapers will survive a little longer. They have they will survive longer because there is still a considerable amount of population that likes things tangible, that likes to have their morning tea or morning coffee with their newspaper, with their magazine. Magazines have that shelf life. So print media may just survive, but of course, the business models will definitely not, unless they have a fair media mix of digital, video, and other inventory to offer to their advertisers, and also have the reach to ensure that. So all in all, as I said, especially in this era of misinformation and disinformation, it is even more critical that we have credible media in place, because like we all mentioned, or you also mentioned in your talk earlier, that this is a time in India when everybody can make news. A small tweet from a Twitter account, what we call as eggs. From an egg of a Twitter account, a small tweet can completely go viral and has the potential to reach billions of audiences. So imagine if an egg can reach billions of audiences, if that egg is spreading disinformation or misinformation, the catastrophe it can unleash, and we have seen in many cases what it has done. So the role of media as gatekeepers is fast dissipating at this juncture. The editor, the role of editor is very minimal, because every reporter just wants to go ahead and break the news, because otherwise in this rush of SEO, in this rush of breaking the broken news, the truth becomes the first casualty. Sometimes facts become the casualty. So it's a very dire situation for sure. But unless the media educators, the media owners, the journalists, all of them come together and do a manthan on this and try and figure out a way out, of course, alongside the advertisers as well, because we have to understand this. Unless we have revenues coming in, the business models of the media, the present day media are fixed, nothing is going to be fixed.
Right, a very, very interesting and a very short but very precise and important analysis on what the credibility crisis in media is all about, and what will perhaps save this. And taking this thread forward and linking this with disinformation and fact check, we have Jaskirat Singh Bawa, who was earlier senior editor with the Quint. He has worked in different verticals of media, and right now is the head of the operations of fact checking and disinformation at Logically, which is actually a UK-based artificial intelligence company. Jaskirat, you worked, tremendously over the years, perhaps 7 to 8 years now, in media, and particularly on fact checking. You've seen that earlier stage of how fact checking actually developed into this entire stream, and disinformation became a very important tool here, where importantly, even countries like India became concerned. And we have platforms at the European Union level as well, EU versus disinformation and others, who are actually looking into disinformation very, very specifically. And in your case, in your company, perhaps artificial intelligence is using different tools to identify, and as a precursor, initially identifying before a disaster actually unfolds, to alert the agencies, etc. So how is this developing? There are, of course, individuals and private players, etc., who are involved in this disinformation that happens, but in many cases, countries as well. For instance, China, where we see a massive level of disinformation happening through state media. So what is your take on this? Is disinformation or tackling disinformation going to be the biggest headache for us, not just in India, but globally in the times to come?
Thank you for the introduction as well as the question. I wanted to take a step back to exactly the time that you mentioned, how we've actually known each other as journalists in this space, even in the television space. Let's go back to, let's say, 2008 to 2011 era. And this is the time where the whole anti-corruption movement in India was also ramping up. We had issues regarding women's safety also coming up. And in the middle of all this, we had a huge crisis of credibility, which Danish has very, very nicely summed up. And in this crisis of credibility, not only were the politicians and the personalities getting stuck, but also the media houses. For too long, we had the control of what makes it to the news bulletin in the hands of a very handful of editors. And now with sudden digitization of news, as well as the penetration of let's say, cheaper handsets and 4G data, the geo revolution, so to speak, suddenly it led to democratization of news as well. No longer were those handful of editors in charge of deciding or being the editorial filter anymore of what makes it online and what doesn't. But why was it so easy for the public in these years? And what I'm trying to string together is this credibility crisis. Why was it so easy for people to start falling for these WhatsApp forwards or for fake news? It's because the editorial leadership across the board did allow for the editorial filter itself became very weak. It led the speed orientation, the orientation of getting news first rather than getting it right, resulted in so many wrong news making it on the air that it slowly degraded the trust that the people had in these established legacy media outfits. And suddenly they started feeling like if the credibility is low, maybe what the information that we're getting through our friends and family and through my uncle or my mama or chacha or taya on WhatsApp is actually more credible. And this, combined with the legal combination of confirmation bias, where what they're reading is confirming their existing biases rather than challenging or informing them, is what has resulted in us being in this situation right now. Now, speaking specifically about my experience, I have dealt with disinformation and misinformation as a journalist. Now I'm also dealing it from a more tech-oriented solution. And I can clearly see that a lot of the newsrooms missed the boat on dealing with disinformation in the early days. In India, a lot of the newsrooms reacted to disinformation only after the US 2016 elections. So you had niche organizations like Boom, etc., coming up only in the 2017 era, late 2016 and early 2017. And in that too, they remained at a nascent stage for a long time with very skeletal stuff, because when it comes to media, they also have to talk about revenue and how to run a newsroom. The problem was that already in 2016, you had bot farms and rudimentary level of artificial intelligence and programming getting involved in the dissemination of fake news and disinformation. It has taken years for fact checkers to catch up and start nailing the sources of these fake news already, but nowhere is it close to dealing with it at scale. When you raise the example of China, now that is something that happens at scale, where thousands, recently we had the news of 3,400 Twitter accounts being banned, thousands of Facebook accounts and pages being shut down because these tech companies found out that they were all part of a coordinated campaign. And I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg, clearly indicating that this is happening at scale. And the fact checkers are not being able to deal with it because they're all human fact checkers. This is where AI is being brought in, or tech solutions are being brought in, to try and get these things counted, or this narrative being counted at scale, or to try and expedite the process with which this is the lie travels around the world before truth even has a chance to put its boots on. And the reason for that is because there's more rigor required in fact checking and finding the truth. So we are hoping to move in a direction where these tech solutions, while the bad actors and manipulators have already used them or misused them rather, let's say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, more enhanced tech solutions can come in handy to allow not just the fact checkers, but the general public to be able to quickly find the facts and the truth about any questionable information that they're coming across. This can be done in various forms, including having the machine learning based solutions where it is scanning the internet for verifiable images. It can easily detect any manipulation that has been done in an image. It can scan a text for anything that may have been already fact-checked by other verified fact checkers. All of these tech-based solutions are very rudimentary ones, which are right now already available. And that is something that we're looking at building to a scale. All of this comes back to the point that none of this would have been needed had it not been a crisis of credibility that Danish had raised, and had it not been for the way in which we had allowed a speed-oriented news approach to lead to a complete breakdown in the news credibility and the quality of news that the people are getting, leading them to believe in whatever they get on their phone through WhatsApp. Also, just to add another extra point over there is the whole revenue model with which the newsrooms run. Of course, ad-supported revenues is the bread and butter for newsrooms. Our entire career as journalists has been dependent on newsrooms that have survived on ad revenues. But is that really the be-all and end-all solution for revenue in the newsrooms? Why I'm asking about this is because we ourselves have lived through 2 recessions in the media sector. Because of the overdependence on the ad revenues, we have had journalists being one of the first ones to face the repercussions of the economic fallout of the, let's say, the 2008 recession, as well as the pandemic-induced economic instability. All of this is also further contributing to the crisis of credibility and making a credible journalism and reporting a very tough battle. And these are, that is not something I have a solution for, nor is it something that I've been able to work towards, but I definitely want to throw it out there as something to ponder over, because it is a major contributor towards the crisis of credibility in journalism that we're facing, despite the democratization of news in the digital sphere.
Right, Jaskirat. I want to come back to you again, Jaskirat, because what you said was very interesting, and about the tech companies and the media, waking up pretty late to this disinformation and fake news. And a major chunk of this social media or the tech social media is, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, many others. But they actually hold the key. And Twitter, perhaps only last year, introduced this tag of manipulated media. Is this enough? One. Secondly, how do you tackle this kind of disinformation at this scale? One, of course, is an organized, massive disinformation that happens, psyops that happen, of course, from states like China, from Iran, Pakistan, others. But what about on Twitter, where individuals with a mass following actually are indulging in fake news or disinformation and are being, agreed to or believed to, completely at face value, and there's no action from Twitter. On the other hand, there are several states that actually complain to Twitter or to Facebook, others, to shut down a few, ideologically opposed or otherwise pages or handles or profiles. In many cases, action takes place. In many cases, it doesn't. Like in my case, several times the Pakistani deep state complains to Twitter that my tweets are not agreeable to them, so action should be taken. Till now, they haven't. But what is the solution to this? Or do you think that Twitter and Facebook are still very reluctant to accept this as a massive challenge?
Very interestingly, Aditya, Twitter and Facebook face the massive brunt of also providing platform to the malicious actors or the people who indulge in fake news. In India, just to answer the first part of your question, how do we tackle that here in India? Interestingly, in India, what makes matters more complicated and why we cannot copy the Western model of fact checking or dealing with disinformation is because in India, most of it is happening in closed groups, which is WhatsApp. You cannot penetrate these WhatsApp groups. We cannot monitor these closed WhatsApp groups unless and until there's a well-meaning citizen who is taking screenshots or forwarding these messages to the fact checkers and to the credible media organizations to fact check these messages. You're not able to detect it. So in India, this is a major challenge that we've not been able to crack yet. Short of well-spirited and well-meaning people getting involved in this space, short of that, there has not been a solution yet. We have already privy to the debate over how much access can government be provided or agencies be provided to WhatsApp messages. That's a whole lot different debate. It is a two-edged double-edged sword. Yes, you can counter misinformation, but there's also the whole freedom of privacy rights and freedom of speech issues as well. So that is going to be like a whole different debate. Now, to move on to your second question is whether the platforms are doing enough. Clearly not. These platforms at their disposal have a huge amount of resources which could easily be implemented or easily be put to use to try and deal with those malicious actors who are spreading disinformation at scale. It's just that it has not been a priority for them yet. That is one, because the disincentive has not been created for these tech platforms to be able to prioritize dealing with disinformation on their platform at scale. Apart from that, there is also a problem of a lack of collaboration. Fact checkers, unfortunately, have not been able to put their minds and their energies together, resources together, to take on the challenge in a collaborative manner. Unfortunately, brand consciousness and brand ego also comes into play. Unfortunately, there's always the thing of me first. The same disease that struck the newsrooms, who started racing against each other for breaking the news first and making a breaking news out of anything, is unfortunately also going to trickle down to the fact checkers, because they, at the end of the day, also belong to the same newsrooms or were from the same newsrooms. So that self-centered approach that I need to do the fact checking first, unfortunately, is also something that is getting in the way of us dealing with those players who are spreading disinformation at scale. It's a very utopian idea to have all these fact checkers come together and work towards a common goal, but there is precedence. Now, while the platforms like tech platforms like Facebook and Twitter do deserve the criticism for not prioritizing dealing with disinformation on their platforms properly, at least commiserate to the resources that they have, the amount of money and the amount of potential, the engineering power that they have. I am convinced at least that they have not been able to put that to effective use. However, where there's criticism against them, they also do deserve the credit for at least being able to come up with certain models where these fact checkers have been able to collaborate. For example, Facebook, they themselves have this third-party fact checker program where, let's just take India, for example, they have various fact checkers who can get together and start dealing with the fake news that pops up on Facebook, and they are provided with this dashboard and they're given access to a way to be able to fact check within their system. And this is one of the fewer collaborative examples, apart from, let's say, Twitter also reaching out to certain media organizations and getting them all together to do the fact checking for them. So unfortunately, these are the only few and far and few collaborative examples that I can think of, where people from different organizations who are focused on fighting disinformation have been able to come together and do it on a common platform. We really do need to figure a way out to be able to get past the brand consciousness and the me first philosophy, so that there's a more collaborative approach, because without that, and without the aid of tech solutions that can help us fight disinformation at scale, we are going to be falling way, way behind those who have already got a head start in spreading disinformation, especially the state actors, because they have endless resources at their disposal in this space.
All right, collaborative approach and tech need to combine together. That's what Jaskirat says, and perhaps is the need of the hour to tackle the menace of fake news and disinformation. One another interesting thing that Jaskirat talked about was the revenue models. And Danish, coming to you on this, because not just you're representing International Business Times, and you're the editorial director for the Newsweek in Asia. You have seen the business models around digital platforms here. One thing that I've noticed here, not just with the digital platforms, but overall in the media, at least in India, perhaps abroad as well, that these are personality oriented. We have a Shekhar Gupta, so there is a print. We have a Siddharth Varadarajan, so there is a The Wire. We have, a certain person, so we have, that particular brand. But the kind of revenue model or generation that is required for a digital platform to sustain here in India hasn't really been achieved, or is very difficult to have here. Of course, we have very successful models as well. We have InShots as a very successful model. We have Glance. We have several other platforms as well who are doing well, who are recreating, who are reinventing themselves. So where are we lacking here, or do you think that this is a progression that is happening at this stage?
Aditya, I think that there are multiple questions in this, but speaking of business models in general, so this isn't just a business model problem in isolation from where I look at it. It's also about, for instance, in the digital sphere, it's also about what inventory is it that you have to offer, and how do the ad exchanges, the online ad exchanges, how are they programmed? Are they buyer-friendly? So there was something very interesting in my research and trying to dig deeper into how do we make sure that our digital revenues grow. And when you look at it, like for instance, multiple ad exchanges, Google AdX, when you look at these exchanges, it is extremely biased towards the buyer side. So for instance, if my platform has an inventory where I have set a floor price of around $1 for a particular impression, say for the 1,000 impressions, what the technology advanced that they will be able to push me to lower my floor price to say around, and then they will come and bid on it and then get the same inventory, which I ideally could have sold for $1 and buy that inventory for 5 cents. So that is a business problem, right? So what is it that a media enterprise, a media entrepreneur, or a media house in general, are they doing enough to ensure that they have something like a dynamic floor pricing, wherein they can ensure they get their money's worth for that inventory that they have, which is unfilled at this juncture. So it is a very complex problem from the digital revenue side of things, because the technology from the side of publishers is not that advanced yet. Not many media houses have enough funding or the money to fund that technology back end, especially from the advertising side. There was one client briefly that I sort of was interacting with in a particular country. Won't name the country to give away the brand, and I'm under an NDA there. So what they wanted is they wanted to club their entire inventory of advertisements on their broadcast, on their print, and on their digital platforms, and offer to a buyer like you or Jaskirat or Dr. Padma here that you want to put an ad on television. How do you do that? So you could just log onto that platform. You could buy that particular space, and even you can simply buy that advertisement, right? So open up the market for them. So media has a lot of thinking to do in terms of how do we fix the business models, the existing ones, most importantly, which are advertisement driven, as Jaskirat also mentioned, which is the problematic model, because at this juncture, we need to innovate. When the world is evolving and innovating, media as a business cannot devolve, because if we want to fund good journalism, we will have to revisit from ground up the business models that we have in place today. Thankfully, with the advent of technology, it is being fixed to a great extent. Like, for instance, Facebook has a publishers program, Google News has a publishers program. So for digital publishers, for instance, traffic is one buzzword in every digital newsroom, and search engine optimization or SEO is something that everybody is running after. So in this very interesting milieu, what is happening is that, again, journalism becomes a casualty. So as I said, it is not, there won't be it is a multi-headed hydra which needs to be handled. It is nothing linear that you can fix. Okay, if I fix my business model, no, you cannot do it. There are too many variables in this, especially what Jaskirat mentioned in the era of misinformation, especially in the era of disinformation. How do you adopt the old school gatekeeping measures and you bring them in the present day modules and ensure that your reader gets credible news, gets the inside details of what they want to? How do you create a quality media house which offers quality multimedia content to your readers as well at the same time?
Right. Jaskirat and both Danish spoke about the credibility crisis and journalism actually becoming a casualty in this entire process. So we began with Dr. Padma and we'll end with Dr. Padma. Dr. Padma, as an educator and as a teacher, and having witnessed media for a very, very long time, are you worried? Are you worried about the decay, in the media that is taking shape? People are more interested not on the credibility, not on how deeper the analysis is, how important it is. Rather, they are more concerned about the hits or the number of likes or shares that are happening right now. So, is that a worry for you as an educator? And how do you see, because you've seen this evolving stage of media as well, where do you see this progressing in years to come? And finally, a word of advice for those people, because there are many youth that come to me and say that they want to become journalists or they want to become anchors particularly, because there's a lot of glamour that is associated with anchoring, people recognizing you on social media or on airports or otherwise. So how do you see this? What would be your word of advice for them?
See, regarding the difficulty which we are facing, yes, it's a very difficult situation, because when we talk about ethics, it's always that, ma'am, but this person or this channel does this. So is it wrong? And then, since it's a classroom, you can always say it's wrong. They are doing it just to garner some, likes and some, momentary, but ethically it is wrong. And, that question of why it is wrong, finally, most of the time we end up telling them that it is because of the business model that they are like, it's all about immediacy, the breaking news factor, like everybody has been talking about, or it's because, of the paid news phenomena or the advertisement driven model that we have in India. And it's very difficult, sometimes it's really difficult to tell them that in real life we need to balance our ethical. And I always go back to it that credibility is something which is at stake. And if as journalists we want the profession to enjoy the same status that it did a few decades ago, then we need to follow certain ethical principles. And also it's very important that people, okay, you might have 1,000 likes and you might get some advertisement, but it could be very short-lived, because once it's exposed, readers may not. And that is one of the things that media is facing, a lot of credibility, especially television news. If you see in the time of the pandemic, a lot of people I know of who say that they've stopped watching television news. They would rather read a paper or, once in a while check their Twitter account and know about the updates, because, the way information was being churned out without a lot of authentic source verification, and that really affects it. But then I think, like everything, like all of you've been talking about, I think the industry per se has to do a lot of, like Jaskrit said, manthan, and I'm sure they'll be able to find some way out. The only thing is that we have to look at, if we are going in a digital format, a lot of investment is not required like what was required for setting up a newspaper organization or setting up a television organization. You don't require that kind of a financial capital to go for it. And yes, today the mobile has enabled everybody. So if you will still get readership, you will still have viewers watching your things. If it might take a longer time, but credibility is very important for sustainability of the media. And it's my personal opinion. And I also, can reiterate this viewpoints, because I can tell you as an educator, in 2005 to 2007, whenever I would take interview for admission, the thing would be that they all wanted to become an news reader. Okay, and they would give me names of particular people that they wanted to emulate. Today, if I ask them, what do you want to become? Hardly 10% of my students want to become journalists. Most of them want to become corporate communicators or PR professionals. Only 10% of them, which is a shift. Earlier, it was only 10% who would want to go into corporate communication and things. But today it's a very shift. And it's also because of, the credibility, the issues that they have seen during the pandemic. It's so many times they ask me, ma'am, print is not paid at all. Digital journalists are not paid at all. And I have to tell them, no, they are paid. You have to work hard for it. It's not like a 9-to-5 job, and you will still be recognized, and we have to, and it's not that the industry needs to be there, because after all, it was conceived of as a fourth estate. The fourth estate may not be doing the functions of the fourth estate today, but we need it in a democracy. We cannot deny that, we do not want a media existence. We need, and journalism, especially because in a country like India, where it's such a large people, all sorts of people from all sorts of strata, journalism has to stay, and journalism has to be credible. People need to know information.
Right. So before we close, just ending remarks from Jaskirat and Danish. One important thing that ma'am touched upon was about, the new students of media, or people who actually want to enter media, are concerned now. I didn't see this concern 10 years back. 10 years back, I'll tell you, when I was in post-graduation for my journalism in Xavier's, I had a class of 50, and very interesting ratio. We had 44 girls and only 6 boys. So this was the kind of interest that even girls really had in media, and not just, yes, there was a craze for particularly anchoring and news readership, but corporate communications, PR, filmmaking, all were in fact, really looked forward to. So Jaskirat and Danish, where do you see media in the years to come? Just 30 seconds to both of you. Indian media in particular, because we are here. Where do you see this 10 years from now, for instance? Danish?
Aditya, see, in this present day scenario, we call it the creators economy, right? So basically, media houses are making money, but individual creators also making money. In some cases, the individual creators are making more money than any regional media organization in its entirety is making money, right? So where is the future of journalism? As I said, as long as we fix the credibility, we may have a future. But my worry is this: that what if the user or the reader just simply moves on, and technology provides them another way out of, why should you depend on a person where you feel that the person is not going to be balanced? I never call it unbiased, because nobody actually can be unbiased, but a person cannot be biased, but a machine can be biased. If you look at a technology called GPT-3, in that, if you sort of, it just brings up, it can just cook up poems for you. It will mix up random words. And I've read some of these poems. Those are really amazing. And those are really, you look at them and you read them, you're like, okay, this is something metaphysical. This is amazing. I've not thought of it, life or world this way. And that's a machine generating for you a poem in arts. So why can't a machine, in the era of artificial intelligence, generate their news as well? What does it need? It needs a source, and source basically can be your social media. And it just needs to put pieces together, get in some historical information, and you're done. I'm working on a project right now which deals with this, and I've tested it. It is safe to say 60% accurate. So 60% in this nascent stage, we are able to bring in technology in say an artificial intelligence program with my set of data set in it, is able to come up with something. Right. Will jobs of journalists be still relevant? Will journalists be still doing the same what we used to do? That is the question.
All right. Jaskirat?
Well, just taking it exactly from where Danish left it off, I hope this is used as a tip for all the budding journalists. Back in when we had entered the field, at that time newsrooms used to take prominence, and they were the be all and end all. What your boss said, the editors, the top editors, there used to be a proper hierarchy of doing things. In the last 4 or 5 years, what we've observed is exactly, again, what Danish mentioned about the creator economy. Those who can write are doing newsletters like on platforms like Substack. And those who are writing very well and doing a very good job are even charging a subscription fee and making good money out of it. Those who can do videos have their own YouTube channels and are getting either support money or ad-based money from the YouTube channels. The only problem there, of course, is that there's no editorial filter. But apparently, it seems like a lot of people seem to have given up on that anyway. I strongly urge all students of Dr. Padma not to bank on just working towards an organizational goal, but also to be working for themselves. Look for your personal branding, build your personal brand. Aditya Raj Kaul is a very good example of how somebody's built a personal brand out of their journalism. Please put yourself out there. Use the platforms that are being provided to you by the tech platforms. Yes, get some ground reporting experience, get to understand what the editorial filters should be. Still use informal editorial filters, bounce your ideas off people. Don't put out your first draft in the form of your tweets and in the form of your Instagram videos or YouTube videos or the new age graphic reels and stories that you're doing. Try and still figure out if there are some people who can be your mentors beyond your newsrooms, but make a personal brand for yourself. And that is one way that you could probably beat the AI that Danish is probably looking at to look at those story writings.
All right. Thank you so much to Jaskirat, Danish, and Dr. Padma. I have to quickly hand it over to Mansi. We're running out of time, but thank you so much to Women Economic Forum, all the organizers, and all the panelists for being there and taking out time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, each one of you, for bringing your unique perspectives on the topic. We feel much more enriched and in the know, so to say. But thank you for also highlighting the challenges of new media. And we know We understand that media is one of the most powerful entities on earth, and you're all the stalwarts of it. So thank you so much for upholding, the industry at large. And on that note, on behalf of the All Ladies League at the Women Economic Forum, I would like to offer you a small gesture of our appreciation and gratitude. Please accept this award, this title on our behalf. It will be emailed to you, but announcing Aditya Raj Kaul, Dr. Padma Rani, Jaskirat Singh Bava, and Danish Manzoor as exceptional leaders of excellence in the work that you do, in the space, in the body of work that you create. We are humbled by your presence, and it's been an absolute privilege to host you, to have you, and thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.